Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe my channel. My mother's hand was buried in the navy wool of my dress uniform, white-knuckled around the hanger, while the brass zipper teeth of the garment bag scratched against the marble wall outside the Astor ballroom. Crystal sconces threw hard gold light across her diamond bracelet. My father stood a step behind her with his jaw locked and his cuff links flashing under the chandeliers. And my brother Daniel kept one palm spread over his tuxedo jacket like he was steadying his own heartbeat. Two bridesmaids froze beside the double doors with their champagne flutes suspended in midair. The wedding planner stopped writing and looked at me over a leather portfolio. Then Daniel leaned in close enough for me to smell bourbon and mint and said, "You are not wearing that in there. Do you understand me, Naomi? You are not turning my wedding into one of your little military pageants." My hands went numb, but my voice didn't. The carpet under my heels was thick cream wool. Somewhere beyond those doors a string quartet kept playing, bright and polite, as if nothing ugly could possibly happen under that kind of music. My name is Naomi Elizabeth Whitaker. I'm 34. And this is the story of how my family tried to make me disappear at my brother's wedding, and how 12 veterans stood up and made sure the truth had witnesses. My mother gave the garment bag a sharp yank. "Please," she hissed, though there was nothing pleading in her face. Vivian Whitaker never pleaded. She arranged. She edited. She removed whatever didn't flatter the picture. Charlotte's parents are already uncomfortable. "We asked you for one thing." Daniel laughed once, short and mean. "You could have just worn a normal dress." "A normal dress," I repeated evenly. "You know exactly what I mean," he snapped. My father, Harold Whitaker, had the same expression he wore in board meetings when he was about to fire someone without raising his voice. One hand in his pocket. Shoulders squared. Eyes flat. "This is not a negotiation," he said. "Your brother is trying to keep today elegant. Respect that." Elegant. That was the word they used when they meant obedient. Charlotte Pembroke's maid of honor shifted her weight and stared at the floor. The wedding planner pressed her lips together. Daniel's best man, Trevor Ames, looked between us with that bright, greedy curiosity people get when they realize a family is about to bleed in public. My mother smoothed the front of her silver silk dress with her free hand. Daniel rolled his shoulders back inside his tailored black tuxedo. My father looked at the closed ballroom doors as if he was calculating exactly how loud this would sound if I forced him to drag me through them. Then my mother said the quiet part out loud. "Do not embarrass us in front of the Pembrokes." There was. Not "do not upset the bride." Not "do not create a distraction." Their standing. Their merger disguised as a marriage. Their precious alliance with the Pembrokes, whose real estate money was older and colder than ours. I looked down at her hand gripping the garment bag. "That uniform embarrasses you now?" Her nostrils flared. Daniel answered for her. "Don't do this." "Do what?" He leaned closer. His smile never reached his eyes. "Pretend you don't know what this is about." I did know. That was the problem. 3 months earlier, my father had asked for my formal army portrait for the Whitaker Foundation's annual report. 2 months earlier, my mother had insisted I attend the engagement party in uniform because, in her words, "the donors adore a service story." 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had sent a photographer to my apartment to get a few candid patriotic shots for the company's new Veterans Housing Initiative. Then 5 days before the wedding, after Charlotte's mother saw the seating chart and learned I would be arriving directly from Fort Belvoir in dress blues, my family suddenly developed a deep respect for discretion. "Hide the uniform, Naomi. Change at the hotel, Naomi. Wear something softer. Something less severe." As if service was a color that clashed with the floral arrangements. My Aunt Colleen chose that moment to step into the corridor with a lacquered smile and a rhinestone clutch. She took one look at the garment bag in my mother's fist and sighed dramatically. "For heaven's sake," she murmured, "can't we have one day that isn't about her?" Daniel exhaled through his nose, almost grateful. He loved an audience, but he loved backup more. "There it is," he said, spreading his hands. "You always do this. Every holiday, every fundraiser, every family event. You show up in that uniform and suddenly nobody remembers anyone else exists." I watched him say it. Watched the little twitch at the corner of his mouth. Watched the pulse jump in his throat. Daniel had always confused being admired with being owed something. "You asked me to come straight from base," I said calmly. "That was before." "Before what?" Before you made this weird. My mother let go of the garment bag just long enough to point a manicured finger at my chest. Do not speak to your brother that way today. I almost smiled. The absurdity of it was so clean it felt polished. They were cornering me in a marble hallway in formal wear under chandelier light with half the wedding party watching, and somehow I was the one with a tone problem. Daniel took the bag from my mother and held it away from me. I'll have someone put it in the coat room. No, I said. The single word landed harder than he expected. His fingers tightened on the hanger. Excuse me, he asked. No. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the quartet beyond the door seemed farther away. Trevor cleared his throat. One of the bridesmaids looked at the planner. My father stepped forward, polished black shoe over polished marble, and lowered his voice to something more dangerous than shouting. Naomi, don't be childish. I met his eyes. You want childish? Publicly taking my property from me in a hallway full of witnesses feels close. My mother's face changed. Not softer. Sharper. You are not a victim. I know, I said. Daniel gave a hard laugh. Good. Because if you try to pull something in there, I will have security remove you. He wanted me angry. Loud. Wait. He wanted me to prove the story he had already rehearsed for the Pembrokes. Difficult sister. Tension addict. Military martyr. Daniel was excellent at making other people perform the role he needed. I reached for the garment bag. He held on. A second hand landed on the strap between us. Charlotte, in ivory silk and old lace, had come out of the bridal suite without anyone noticing. Her veil was pinned up, not down, and the overhead light made the pearls at her ears glow. She didn't look at me. She looked at Daniel. Why is everyone in the hallway? She asked. Daniel's smile came back instantly, thin as wax. Nothing. Naomi's just deciding to be difficult. Charlotte's eyes flicked to the navy wool visible through the half-open zip. About the uniform? My mother answered too quickly. It's handled. Charlotte looked at me then. Really looked. Her hands were clasped too tightly at her waist. Naomi, she said carefully, I thought we agreed on cocktail attire for family. We, I repeated. Daniel exhaled with performative patience. See. I could have corrected her. Could have told her she'd only heard the version they wanted her to hear. Could have told her about the emails, the donor packets, the staged photographs, the way my service had been useful until it threatened the symmetry of her mother's reception table design. Instead I let the moment sit. Let everyone in that bright corridor feel how determined my family was to erase something they had spent years exploiting. Then I loosened my grip on the bag. Daniel straightened, already relieved. My mother's shoulders dropped an inch. My father looked almost bored again. I said very quietly, keep it zipped. For now. That was the first time any of them looked uncertain. Inside the ballroom, the air was cold with expensive air conditioning and smelled faintly of white roses and seared butter. Candlelight trembled against mirrored columns. The tablecloths were heavy ivory linen. The chairs were gold-backed and upholstered in cream satin. Daniel and Charlotte's initials were projected across the dance floor in soft amber light, and every polished glass surface reflected the same story. Money, control, perfection. I took my seat at table 6 between a retired judge my mother adored and Daniel's college friend whose entire personality appeared to be cuff links. My garment bag had been sent to the coat room under Trevor's supervision, which was exactly where I expected it to go. My phone rested face down beside my water glass. In my clutch against black satin lining were 3 items: a slim silver flash drive, a folded packet of affidavits, and the business card of attorney Avery Sloan from Mercer and Vale. I hadn't come unprepared. I'd come precisely on time. By dessert Daniel was glowing. The ceremony had gone off without a scratch. Charlotte had smiled on cue. Harold Whittaker had shaken the right hands. Vivian had floated between tables like a swan over black water, all pearl teeth and controlled delight. Twice, men from the Pembroke side of the room had asked me why I wasn't in uniform after hearing so much about the army daughter. And twice my mother had intercepted before I could answer. Then Daniel stood for his toast. The room responded exactly the way rooms always responded to Daniel. Chairs angled toward him. Laughter arrived before the punchlines. People who barely knew him looked ready to forgive him for things he hadn't done yet. He tapped his champagne flute with a spoon and grinned. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Warm laughter. Glasses lifted. Candlelight moved over the polished silverware. He started with Charlotte. Her grace. Her family. The merger was almost audible. Then he thanked our parents for showing us what loyalty looks like. That landed with the Pembrokes. I saw Charlotte lower her eyes. And then, because Daniel never knew when he already had enough, he turned toward me. And I want to say something about my sister, Naomi. My judge companion perked up. Across the room my mother's smile froze at the edges. Daniel put one hand over his heart. Naomi's had a hard time understanding that not every family event has to become a statement. A few nervous laughs. Someone shifted a fork. He kept going. But we love her. We always will. Even when she tries to make things about herself. Even when she brings certain. He glanced toward the coat room. Visual aids. That got more laughter, uglier this time. Trevor barked one laugh too loud. Aunt Colleen covered her mouth with her napkin like she was trying to be tasteful. I picked up my water and took a slow sip. Daniel saw it and mistook calm for helplessness. So, he said brightly, in the spirit of family and because tonight is about unity, I'm asking Naomi to let the past stay in the past and stop trying to punish everyone around her because she chose a different life. The room tightened. There was not just humiliation. Positioning. He was building a frame around me in real time. My father rose halfway from his chair. Daniel, he said, pretending warning. Daniel waved him off, magnanimous now. No, Dad, it's fine. We should be honest. Naomi's been making accusations about the company's Veterans Initiative. About Mom and Dad. About me. So let's clear this up right now. Charlotte turned to him sharply. Daniel. He ignored her. My sister believes that because she served, she gets to question how the rest of us support the community. She's upset she wasn't consulted on a few decisions, and instead of behaving like family, she's been threatening legal action. A murmur swept the room. Soft. Fast. Predatory. I set my glass down on the linen. The stem clicked once against the charger plate. Daniel reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. In fact, he said, I have an email right here where Naomi demands access to private financial records she has no right to see. So before she can poison tonight with more drama, I think everyone deserves to know what this really is. He unfolded the page with a flourish. The overhead pin spots caught the white paper like a flare. My mother stood now too, one hand at her throat. Daniel, enough. He smiled at her without looking. It's fine, Mom. Then he began reading what was supposed to be my email. Selected lines. Conveniently clipped. A perfect little portrait of a jealous, unstable sister making baseless threats because she couldn't stand not being the center of attention. He had even left in one sentence I had actually written. I won't let you use veterans as window dressing. Out of context it sounded bitter. In context it was a warning. By the time he finished, the room had already chosen sides. I could see it in the eyes. Charlotte's father sat very still with his hands folded over polished walnut cane wood. Aunt Colleen looked almost thrilled. Trevor slouched back like he'd bought a ticket. My mother's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. My father stared at me, not with anger anymore but with expectation. Surrender now, his eyes said. Cry now. Leave quietly. Let us fix the version. I stood. Chair legs whispered over wood. 12 tables stopped breathing. Daniel smiled in relief. He thought I was going to run. Instead I reached for my phone. He laughed. Oh good. Are you going to fact-check me from the head table? No, I said evenly. I'm going to help you finish. His smile twitched. I unlocked the screen and touched once. The ballroom projector, the one Daniel's event team had used all evening for engagement photos and childhood slides, blinked from the Whitaker Pembroke monogram to my email inbox. A hard white rectangle lit the far wall. People turned in their chairs all at once, a wave through satin and wool. Daniel's face changed first. Because the email on the wall was the full thread. Not his cropped page. The whole exchange. Date stamps. Forward chains. Attachments. His requests for my military portrait. His wording about maximizing veteran optics. My mother asking whether medals would photograph well beside the foundation banner. My father writing in neat corporate prose, we should keep Naomi visible until the Pembrokes are fully committed. The judge beside me inhaled so sharply I heard it over the speakers. Daniel took one step toward me. Turn that off. I didn't. I scrolled. The next file filled the wall. A donor brochure mock-up for Whitaker Horizon Homes, our family company's new veterans housing initiative. My face was on the cover in dress blues. Not a stock image. Not a public army photo. The private portrait they had asked me for as family. Across the bottom in serif gold lettering were words I had never approved. Inspired by Major Naomi Whitaker's sacrifice, we are proud to honor those who served. A rustle moved through the room. Then I opened the invoice report. Not flashy. Just columns. Dates. LC names. Wire amounts. Quiet numbers under clean fluorescent scan lines. Grayline Civic Consulting. Bexley Transitional Services. 3 shell vendors. 12 housing support disbursements approved, billed, and rerouted. Daniel's voice cracked on my name. What is this? This, I said, is where the money went. My father started around the table, moving faster than I had seen him move in years. Naomi, sit down. I would, I replied, but you're committing fraud standing up. The sentence hit the room like a dropped tray. My father stopped. Daniel's hand went to the back of a chair. Not gracefully. He missed the first time and caught the carved gold edge on the second. His complexion drained in layers. My mother took one step backward and collided with Trevor, who lurched aside, spilling champagne down his shirt front. Charlotte was staring at the wall. I let the next revelation arrive slowly. Those invoices are tied to 12 veteran families your foundation featured in donor appeals, I said. Families who were promised housing stabilization grants. Families who signed intake forms, provided service records, and were used in your fundraising materials. Families who did not receive the support the brochures claimed they did. That's a lie, Daniel snapped too quickly. I touched the screen again. 12 names appeared. Not full files. Just initials, branch, grant status, payment discrepancy. An Army Staff Sergeant from Petersburg. A Marine Gunnery Sergeant from Norfolk. A Navy Corpsman from Arlington. A retired Air Force mechanic from Fredericksburg. 12. The room had gone so still the candle flames seemed louder. Then I turned away from the wall and looked at the room instead. Would the Whitaker Horizon guests please stand? For half a second nobody moved. Daniel actually laughed. A brittle, disbelieving sound. Then a chair near the back slid out. Sergeant Leonard Price rose first, one hand on a titanium cane, his dark suit pressed so sharply it looked cut from paper. The woman beside him stood with him, chin high. Across the room, a broad-shouldered man with a burn scar along his neck pushed to his feet. Then a woman in emerald silk with a service pin at her collarbone stood. Then another. And another. 12 in all, from 3 tables Daniel had insisted be placed near the dance floor because he'd wanted a hero image for the photographer. They rose one chair at a time, deliberate as a roll call. My mother made a small sound in her throat. Trevor sat down so abruptly his chair legs scraped like metal. The veterans did not shout. They didn't need to. Their silence was heavier than noise. Leonard Price adjusted the knot of his tie. Teresa Alvarez, former Navy, folded her hands in front of her silver dress. Jerome Cutter, retired Marines, lifted his chin and fixed Daniel with a stare that stripped the room bare. They stood like a wall Daniel had built for decoration only to discover it had load-bearing truth inside it. Charlotte whispered, "Oh my God." I looked at Daniel. "You invited them for optics." "I invited them to hear the truth." He blinked hard. Once. Twice. His eyes darted to my father, then to my mother, then back to the wall. "This is extortion," he said, but the word came out thin. "No," I answered. "This is documentation." My father found his voice again. "You had no authority to access those records." "You're right," I said. "That's why your executive assistant pulled them." That was revelation number 4, and it landed exactly where I wanted it to. Because in the far corner, beside the dessert station and the polished steel coffee urns, Marina Ortiz set down her tray and stepped forward in black catering attire that hid nothing about the steadiness of her posture. Daniel stared at her. "You." Marina gave him a level look. "My father is one of the 12. The implications settled over the room with the slow weight of stone. I didn't rush the rest. Deliberate slowness was its own kind of force. I closed my phone, tucked it into my clutch, and reached for the folded affidavits. I smoothed the top page with 2 fingers. Each of these guests has a copy of their own file, I said. Each file contains payment summaries, intake records, and the grant commitments made in Whitaker Horizons donor campaign. My attorney has the originals, plus forensic copies of the internal ledger and the server metadata attached to that cropped email you just read aloud. Daniel swallowed. My father's lower eyelid twitched. My mother's hand was still pressed to her collarbone, but now it looked less like shock and more like she was checking whether breath could still get in. Charlotte took a small step away from Daniel. That was when he realized the room had moved. Not physically. Socially. The axis had shifted. You set me up, he said. I shook my head once. I let you continue. He made a grab for the projector remote. Marina was closer. She took it off the table before he got there. Actually, I said quietly, you set yourselves up. I just made sure there were witnesses. Nobody laughed now. Nobody even looked away. The wedding planner had lowered her pen. Aunt Colleen's rhinestone clutch hung forgotten at her side. Charlotte's father had gone completely still, a man who understood contracts and consequences at the same time. Somewhere in the kitchen a tray crashed. No one in the ballroom flinched. Daniel's voice dropped to a ragged whisper. What do you want? Such a revealing question. Not what are you doing? Not is it true? What do you want? I held his gaze. Tonight? Nothing. Eat your cake, Daniel. Then I turned to the 12 veterans and inclined my head. Thank you for coming. Leonard Price answered for all of them. Ma'am. One word. Respectful. Final. I picked up my clutch, stepped away from the table and walked toward the ballroom doors. My heels struck the wood in an even rhythm like a metronome. Nobody blocked me. Nobody reached out. Behind me, Daniel was already starting to talk too fast, his voice rising as he tried to gather scattered control with bare hands. My father called my name once. My mother didn't call it at all. I didn't look back. In the hotel corridor, the marble felt colder. The gold light looked harsher. A man from valet brought my garment bag from the coat room and handed it to me with both hands, as if he understood it was no longer just clothing. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside alone. They thought they had hidden a uniform. They had no idea I had wrapped a case inside it. The next 6 days moved with the clean violence of a storm front. By 10 the following morning, Mercer and Vale had filed preservation notices. By noon, Daniel's frantic calls had climbed into double digits. By 3, my mother had left her first voicemail, voice brittle with outrage, saying I had misunderstood what happened and that family matters should stay private. By evening, Charlotte had not filed the marriage license. On Monday, Avery Sloan requested a formal conference at Nolan, Briggs & Keene, the law firm Harold Whitaker had used for 20 years. He didn't want a public scene. He wanted containment. Containment was no longer available. The conference room on the 32nd floor smelled faintly of leather, coffee and furniture polish. Morning light poured through the glass wall in cool silver bands and laid itself across the long mahogany table. Black leather chairs sat in 2 straight rows, severe and expensive. A tray of untouched pastries waited on a sideboard beneath framed abstracts nobody ever really saw. Authority had a texture in rooms like that. Smooth wood. Thick carpet. Filtered air. People lied more softly there. I arrived 5 minutes early in a charcoal suit and a white silk blouse. No uniform. No medals. My hair was pinned back. My hands were empty except for a slim folio and a coffee I set down without drinking. Avery Sloan stood at the window reviewing notes, all precise angles and calm economy. She was in her early 40s with a low voice and the kind of composure that made panic look amateur. Beside her sat forensic accountant Devon Sue, already arranging color-tabbed binders in a neat line. At 9 o'clock exactly, Harold entered first. That alone told me things were different. A week earlier he would have expected everyone else to rise when he came in. Now he crossed the threshold with both hands visible and a temporary badge clipped to his lapel because building security no longer waved him through without record. The power wasn't gone, but it had thinned. Daniel followed wearing a navy suit that fit perfectly and confidence that didn't. He looked puffy under the eyes. He had shaved too close under his jaw. My mother came next in cream wool and pearls, posture still flawless, mouth carved into something too stiff to be called dignity. Aunt Colleen did not appear. Trevor did not appear. Neither did half the orbiters who liked Whitaker money more than Whitaker problems. Charlotte came in with her own attorney. That was the first crack Daniel heard and understood. He stopped cold. What is she doing here? Charlotte did not answer him. She took the chair farthest from his. Her ivory engagement ring was gone. Harold looked at Avery. This was not part of the agreement. Avery, Saturday, there is no agreement yet, Mr. Whitaker. Daniel dropped into a chair and leaned forward, both palms flat on the mahogany. Let's stop pretending this is anything but leverage. Naomi got embarrassed at the wedding, so now we're doing theater. I took my seat across from him. You seemed comfortable with theater last Saturday. His jaw flexed. Avery opened the first binder. We'll keep this efficient. My client has evidence of fraudulent misrepresentation, unlawful use of likeness, diversion of charitable funds, retaliatory intimidation, and attempted document manipulation. We are here to discuss cooperation. My mother laughed once. It sounded fragile, like glass tapped with a spoon. Attempted document manipulation. Is that what we're calling family emails now? Devon slid a packet across the table. It's what we call altered metadata. She didn't touch it. Avery nodded to the wall monitor. A timeline appeared. Simple. White background. Black text. Red markers. March 4th. Whitaker Horizon Homes donor concept approved. March 11th. Request sent to Naomi Whitaker for military portrait. April 2nd. Internal memo regarding veteran optics for Q2 donor cycle. April 18th. Grayline Civic Consulting LLC formed. May 7th. First 12 grant commitments issued to veteran applicants. May 21st. Donor appeal mailed using Naomi's image and service record. May 27th. Funds routed to Grayline and Bexley Transitional Services. June 9th. Daniel Whitaker requests cropped email extracts regarding family instability. June 30th. Marina Ortiz downloads ledger backup to external archive. July 12th. Naomi Whitaker retains counsel. July 18th. Wedding. The date markers sat there in crisp order, cold as instruments. Daniel tried to laugh. A shell company with a patriotic name and a slide deck doesn't prove anything. Devon turned a page. Then let's prove something else. He began methodically, the way surgeons narrate while working. Formation documents for Grayline filed by an associate at Whitaker Holdings. Wire transfer approvals signed through Daniel's office. Duplicate vendor addresses tied to a mailbox service in Alexandria. A payment authorization entered from Harold's executive terminal at 11:42 p.m. on May 27th. Donor brochures printed after my refusal to consent, with internal notation reading use service image anyway, family clearance assumed. Harold's fingers curled around the armrests of his chair. My mother kept smoothing the edge of her notepad over and over, though she had written nothing. Charlotte's attorney slid her a fresh sheet. She never looked at Daniel. When Devon put the altered wedding email on screen, complete with its edit history, Daniel's face lost color so quickly it was almost educational. He started talking before the document finished loading. That's ridiculous. Anyone could fabricate. Devon cut him off with the first real edge in his voice. Server logs aren't feelings, Mr. Whitaker. Silence. Avery stood and moved to the timeline, one manicured finger tracing the dates without drama. The scheme matters because the sequence matters. You solicited donor money using service-connected representations. You promised direct housing stabilization grants. You diverted those funds before public reporting. When Naomi Whitaker began asking questions, you prepared a narrative to discredit her. The wedding was not incidental. It was leverage. A controlled social setting with witnesses selected to preserve your version if she objected. My father finally spoke. That is a grotesque reading of family conflict. I looked at him. Was the coat room part of the family conflict too? His mouth tightened. Daniel turned to me with sudden heat. You don't know what pressure we were under. The Pembrokes were watching every detail. Donors were nervous. The rollout was behind. We had to manage perception. There are moments when people reveal themselves so fully you almost feel embarrassed for them. That was one. Manage perception, I repeated. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. He started to say my name. Avery raised a hand and he stopped. Then she nodded toward the side door. Ms. Ortiz. Marina entered in a navy blazer and simple gold hoops, Hair in a low knot, tablet tucked under one arm. No catering black. No careful invisibility. She took the chair beside Devon and set down a folder of her own. Daniel stared at her like he still couldn't process that loyalty had an exit door. You stole proprietary information, he said. Marina folded her hands. I preserved evidence after you told me to clean the veteran files and replace the missing disbursement notes with pending language. My mother inhaled sharply. Harold turned to Daniel. You said there was no instruction in writing. Daniel's eyes snapped to him. Because there wasn't. Marina unlocked her tablet. There was a voice memo. She pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the leather room, tinny but unmistakable. Irritated. Impatient. If Naomi asks again, tell her compliance is reviewing. And scrub the 12 from the donor folder before next week. I don't want incomplete cases sitting where she can weaponize them. Nobody moved. Marina hit stop. She looked at Harold, not Daniel. My father slept in his truck for 11 days waiting for a housing grant your brochures said had been approved. You used his story in 2 mailers. That's why I switched sides. Switched sides. As if there had ever been 2 honorable choices on the table. Daniel slumped back. The leather sighed under him. My mother finally touched the papers in front of her. Not to read. To ground herself. Harold turned slowly toward his son. You told me this was a cash flow delay. Daniel's laugh came out as a dry scrape. Oh, don't do that. Don't sit there and act shocked. You signed the authorizations. My mother looked from one to the other, and for the first time since I was a child, I watched her lose command of the room she had helped design. Daniel, she whispered. He ignored her. You told me to keep donor confidence stable. Dad said the numbers would be balanced after Q3 land closings. Mom approved the campaign language because she wanted the Pembrokes impressed. But sure. Let's make me the monster. There was the fracture. Harold's face went hard. Mind your mouth. Daniel leaned forward. Why? Because Naomi finally brought a bigger audience than you did. Avery did not interrupt. Professionals understand the value of letting truth travel the last few feet on its own. My mother turned to Charlotte as if she could still salvage something. Charlotte, you know Daniel loves you. Charlotte looked at her with a calm so complete it almost resembled mine. Mrs. Whitaker, this stopped being about love when your son tried to use a wedding reception to discredit a whistleblower. The word whistleblower landed like a stamp. Daniel looked at Charlotte, then really looked and saw that she was gone even while sitting 3 chairs away. You're enjoying this, he said. No, she replied quietly. I'm understanding it. Avery resumed as if none of the emotion mattered, which was part of why she was good. Here is the choice. Full cooperation, immediate restitution to the 12 named families, public correction of the Whitaker Horizon campaign, written acknowledgement of unauthorized use of Naomi Whitaker's likeness and service record, board resignation by Daniel Whitaker pending investigation, and independent forensic review of all foundation accounts. Or we file. Harold's nostrils flared. And if we refuse? Avery's tone never changed. Then we go civil first and criminal second. Daniel stood so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. This is blackmail. No, I said. This is the invoice. He rounded on me. You think you've won because you embarrassed us. I met his stare. No. I think I've won because I stopped you. He laughed again, but it shook in the middle. You've always needed an enemy. I could have answered a dozen ways. Instead I opened my folio and slid one last packet across the table. Private investigator receipts. He froze when he saw the letterhead. 3 months earlier, Daniel had hired a firm to document behavior irregularities, in case I became a problem. They had followed me twice before deciding I was mostly commuting, working, and buying groceries like an irritatingly stable person. One investigator, a former Marine gunnery sergeant named Russell Vane, had called me after recognizing my name from a veterans mentorship event at Quantico. I wanted you to see them, I said. Daniel frowned. What? The reports. The photos. The coat room. The cropped email. I leaned back. I made sure you'd find exactly what I wanted you to find. Harold went still. Avery allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. I continued. When Russell Vane contacted me, I told him to keep taking the assignment. I told him to bill on time. I told him to forward every request your office made for instability indicators and optics concerns. Daniel looked at the investigator receipts again as if the paper itself had betrayed him. Next time, I said softly, make sure they're not working for both sides. That finished him. Not loudly. Quietly. You could see the structure go. His shoulders lowered. His eyes lost their fixed point. He sat back down because standing had stopped helping. Harold asked for a recess. Avery declined. My mother asked for privacy. Charlotte's attorney declined that too. Daniel demanded his own counsel. Avery said, you should have one. Devon pushed a prepared contact list across the table. The room split after that. Not into winners and losers. Into preservation instincts. Harold wanted the foundation saved. Vivian wanted the family name contained. Daniel wanted personal exposure minimized. Charlotte wanted clean separation. Marina wanted restitution in writing. Avery wanted signatures. And I wanted exactly what I had wanted from the beginning. The 12 made whole. My name removed from lies. The record corrected. By 2:40 p.m. fresh coffee had gone cold in paper cups. The sunlight had shifted from silver to white and flattened across the glass. 3 revised drafts sat on the table marked in blue ink and clipped at the corners. Daniel now had separate counsel, a nervous man from another floor with a yellow tie and the exhausted look of someone who had answered a bad phone call at lunch. Avery read the final terms aloud. Restitution to all 12 veteran families within 7 business days. Independent audit overseen by outside counsel. Immediate suspension of Whitaker Horizon fundraising. Public statement acknowledging unauthorized use of military identity and false campaign representations. Daniel Whitaker's resignation from all operational roles. Harold Whitaker's temporary leave from Foundation oversight pending review. No retaliation against Marina Ortiz or any cooperating witness. I watched the pen tremble once between Daniel's fingers before he signed. It was a small tremor. Most humiliations are. Harold signed next, his face blank in the way powerful men go blank when expression itself feels like a concession. My mother did not need to sign the legal agreement, but she signed the family statement Avery had drafted, the one acknowledging that public comments made at the wedding regarding my motives and conduct were inaccurate and harmful. She held the pen like it offended her to need it. Charlotte signed her own separation document last. When it was done, papers were stacked, copied, initialed and sealed into neat gray folders. The sound of closing binders was strangely satisfying. Daniel stood first. His tie was loosened now. His hair had collapsed at the front. He looked at me across all that polished wood and filtered authority and said, "Are you happy?" I closed my folio. "You used my service when it made you look generous and buried it when it made you feel small. Happy isn't the word." His throat moved. My mother rose with her handbag tucked under one arm. She looked older than she had on the wedding day, though the light in this room was kinder. "Naomi," she said, voice low and tight, "we are still your family." I stood too. "You were," I replied. Harold's jaw flexed. He reached for whatever final line he thought a father should have in a room like that. I saved him the trouble. At the door I turned back once and said, "You were so worried I'd ruin the pictures. You should have worried about the negatives." Then I left them there with the mahogany, the leather and the signatures. 6 months later, the mornings in my apartment in Old Town Alexandria felt like a language I had finally learned. The windows in my kitchen faced east, and the early sun came in warm over the exposed brick and the pale oak table I'd bought from a salvage shop after the settlement cleared. My coffee maker hissed softly on the counter. A basil plant I kept forgetting to prune leaned toward the light. The first morning I realized silence could feel safe. I stood barefoot on cool tile with a ceramic mug in my hands and watched gold light move across the glass of the balcony door. Fresh starts are rarely dramatic. Usually they sound like a kettle clicking off. Usually they look like sunlight reaching a surface that hasn't been scratched yet. By then the karmic catalog had written itself. Daniel lost everything he valued in the order he valued it. First came the operational resignation, which he told people was temporary right up until the audit report made that fantasy impossible. Then came the board vote. Then came the donors who wanted their names nowhere near his. Then the business journals that stopped calling him the next Whitaker and started calling him a former executive under review. The Pembrokes closed ranks on their side of the city and never publicly insulted him, which was worse. In our world, silence from old money is social taxidermy. He did not go to prison, not then, but he spent 18 months paying lawyers to keep that possibility theoretical. The man who once couldn't enter a room without expanding inside it became someone who checked over his shoulder when doors opened. Harold Whittaker kept the company but not the certainty. He survived by surrendering pieces. Committee control. Foundation oversight. 2 development projects. Half his easy authority. Men like my father don't collapse all at once. They erode. 1 invitation not extended. 1 board seat not renewed. 1 charity gala where the conversation thins when they approach. For a man who had built his identity from handshakes on polished golf course patios and private dining rooms with brushed brass sconces, public caution became its own punishment. Vivian took the social consequences hardest. My mother had always treated reputation like crystal. Display it carefully, polish it constantly, and never admit how fragile it really is. She resigned from the hospital auxiliary before they could ask. The museum board restructured. 2 women she had called friends for 20 years suddenly communicated through assistants. At church, people hugged her too long and spoke too softly. Pity was the one thing she had never learned to wear. Aunt Colleen, who had spent half the wedding whispering that I made everything about myself, discovered what happens when group texts leak. One of her messages about the charity soldier routine found its way to a reporter covering the Whittaker Horizon fallout. She became a footnote in an article about socialite cruelty, which sounds minor until you've met a woman who lives off curated graciousness. She still hosted luncheons, but fewer people came, and the ones who did checked their phones under the table. Trevor Ames lost his consulting retainer when Daniel stopped having power to distribute favors. A man whose personality had been accessed suddenly had to introduce himself without using anyone else's last name. I heard he took a position in Tampa and told people the move was strategic. Maybe it was. Distance can look strategic if you say it in the right blazer. The 12 veterans were paid in full within 6 business days, not 7. Funny how fast systems move when signatures are under threat. Marina left Whittaker Holdings before the ink dried and came to work with me 3 months later. Because yes, there was a me to work with by then. The ordeal had clarified something I hadn't realized I was building while surviving it. I was good at patterns, pressure, and people who hid theft under polished language. I understood how institutions used honor as wallpaper. I understood how easily service stories could be monetized by people who had never sacrificed anything except convenience. So I founded Mercer Field Advisory with Marina and Devon on contract. We helped nonprofits, veteran assistance programs, and mid-size foundations audit donor communications, verify disbursement pathways, and build fraud-resistant systems before a charming executive could turn gratitude into a revenue stream. Our office sat above a bookstore on King Street with matte black railings, exposed pipes, and desks made of reclaimed walnut. The lighting was warm. The coffee was strong. Nobody there confused elegance with silence. The messages from my family came in phases. First came outrage. You've humiliated us. You've gone too far. Call your mother. Then came strategy. Can we discuss this privately? The press is distorting things. We need to present a united front. Then came the messages that were almost worse because they wore memory as camouflage. I miss you. The house is strange without you at Thanksgiving. Your father keeps looking at your old room. The family isn't the same. I archived every one of them. I did not respond. Not out of cruelty. Out of discipline. People who break you and then request your softness are not seeking reconciliation. They are seeking access. One Thursday in October, Marina came into my office with 2 coffees in a cardboard tray and leaned against the doorframe with that expression she got when gossip had earned its place as data. You won't believe who I just saw, she said. I looked up from a grant review packet. If it's Daniel, I'm billing you for emotional labor. She smiled. Worse. Trevor. Alive. Technically. He was at a networking breakfast at the Pendleton. He tried to pitch municipal branding strategy to a woman who asked if he was the one from the wedding video. I blinked. There's a wedding video. Marina handed me my coffee. There are always videos. I laughed then. Really laughed. The kind that loosens the spine. What happened? I asked. He left early. Very strategic exit. That was one of the gentler karma updates. The sharper one came from Charlotte. By then she and I had developed something neither of us would have predicted in that hotel hallway. Not intimacy exactly. Not at first. More like clean respect, the kind that can grow where mutual disillusionment has already cleared the weeds. She had been on the other side until the other side revealed itself too fully to ignore. After she ended things with Daniel, she moved into a townhouse in Georgetown, left her family's real estate office, and started a small art advisory practice with a focus on veteran artists and military family collections. Maybe that surprised people. Didn't surprise me. Once you discover how aggressively image can be manipulated, authenticity starts to feel expensive enough to protect. She called me one evening while I was closing up the office. Warm lamplight was pooling over the walnut conference table. Rain needled softly against the front windows. "Have you heard?" she asked. "Heard what?" "Daniel's trying to launch a podcast." I closed my eyes. "No. It's called Rebuilding Trust." I let out a long breath. "That sounds fictional." "I assure you, unfortunately, it is not." "What's episode 1? Personal resilience after public misunderstanding." I sat down slowly in my chair. "Charlotte." "I know." We were both quiet for a second. Then she laughed first and I followed. The sound of it in that warm office, with rain on the glass and papers stacked neatly and no one lying to my face, felt like wealth. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive as lightning. Sometimes it shows up in branding decisions. Not everything became easier. That wouldn't be true. There were mornings when I still woke with my jaw clenched because I had dreamed about the hallway outside the ballroom. There were grocery store aisles where I saw a woman in silver silk from the back and my chest tightened before my brain caught up. There were holidays I spent with friends because the alternative was being invited somewhere on the condition that I help preserve fiction. Stability isn't a prize someone hands you. It's a practice. Repeated. Practiced. But there was good too. More of it than I expected. There was Leonard Price cutting the ribbon at the reopening of a transitional housing unit our firm helped rescue from another lazy board. There was Teresa Alvarez sending me a Christmas card with a photo of her granddaughter on the porch of the condo she finally bought after her back pay grant arrived. There was Marina eating Thai takeout from the carton at 8:30 p.m. while we argued over whether a draft compliance policy used too many semicolons. There was Devin pretending not to enjoy being thanked by clients who had no idea how much money he'd quietly saved them. There was the simple dignity of working in a place where facts did not need cosmetics. And there was the uniform. I didn't hide it again. I had it professionally cleaned and pressed. The navy wool came back immaculate. The brass shone. I hung it in a cedar wardrobe by itself, not because it was fragile but because it deserved space. When I wore it after that, it was for promotions, ceremonies, memorials, and one speaking event for a foundation that actually did what it promised. No donor brochure used my face without written consent again. That winter my mother sent one last message. "I didn't know how to protect everyone and keep you." I read it once. Then I archived it with the others. Because the truth was she had never been trying to protect everyone. She had been trying to protect the arrangement. There's a difference, and once you feel it in your hands, you never mistake one for the other again. That evening in late March, the city was all orange glass and soft edges. Sunset poured itself over the rooftops and turned the Potomac into a long band of copper. From Charlotte's terrace in Georgetown, the stone planters held early rosemary, and the iron railing was still warm where the last light touched it. Below us, headlights had begun threading through the streets. Somewhere a siren moved and softened. Somewhere somebody was setting plates on a table. Charlotte handed me a stemless glass of sparkling water with lime. "I checked," she said. "It is not a federal offense to enjoy peace." "Good," I replied. "I'm already over quota." She smiled and raised her glass. I touched mine to hers. The sound was clear and small and complete. If you had told me the woman who once stood in an ivory dress while my family tried to manage me would one day be the person sharing sunset silence with me on a stone terrace, I would have thought you were very bad at reading people. But growth has strange architecture. Sometimes the people who begin as scenery in your pain become witnesses to your rebuilding. Sometimes the person who almost married your brother ends up helping you curate an art benefit for adaptive housing grants and sends you links to terrible podcasts for comic relief. We stood there in the orange glow, city lights waking one by one, and I thought about the version of me who had stepped into that marble hallway outside the Astor Ballroom with a garment bag in one hand and old loyalty still stitched into her instincts. She had been disciplined, capable, and far more naive than she knew. She still believed that if she stayed calm enough, useful enough, honorable enough, the people who claimed her would eventually honor her back. I don't judge her for that. Hope can look a lot like discipline until someone charges interest on it. The woman I became is calmer, not colder. Sharper, not harder. I know now that composure is not surrender. Documentation is not cruelty. Walking away without shouting is still a form of force. I know that family is not defined by who shares your last name under chandelier light, but by who stands when truth asks something costly of them. And in ways I would never say aloud to their faces, I am grateful to my parents and my brother. Not for what they did. For what they made impossible to ignore. They forced me to see the distance between image and character. They forced me to stop volunteering for my own erasure. They forced me to build a life where my value did not depend on somebody else's comfort. That is not a gift I would have chosen. It is still a gift I kept. Charlotte leaned on the warm stone railing. You're doing that thing, she said. What thing? The quiet thinking. Dangerous habit. Usually means you're about to say something inconveniently wise. I looked out at the last of the sun slipping behind the buildings, at the sky going from amber to rose to blue-black in slow layers, and felt something in me settle with the ease of a door finally fitting its frame. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about making a scene, I said. It's about letting the truth stand up for you. Charlotte tipped her glass toward me. That, she said, is inconveniently wise. The city lights sharpened below us. The air cooled. Somewhere behind us, inside the apartment, music drifted from a speaker low and warm. And that was the real ending of it. Not the signatures. Not the audit. Not the whispers that followed my family through rooms they used to own. The real ending was this. I was no longer willing to be reduced so other people could feel taller. I was no longer interested in protecting lies that required my silence to survive. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about punishing the people who tried to bury you. It's about letting the truth rise, letting it stand, and never hiding who you are again.